Today is January 24th, 2014. Welcome to episode 78 of Let's Talk Bitcoin, a twice-weekly show about the ideas, people, and projects building the digital economy and the future of money. Visit us at letstalkbitcoin.com for our daily guest blog, all our past episodes, and of course, tipping addresses. My name is Adam B. Levine, and today the gang's all here. Mike Young is the founder of the Simon Fraser Bitcoin Club, located in Vancouver, Canada. From ATMs to events to the growth of user adoption, I spoke with Mike earlier this month about what's happening in the North. Then, India is one of the largest opportunities for technologies like Bitcoin, but to this point, the region's been a bit of a wild card. Andreas caught up with Amit Nirganarthi, who gives us an update about the Bitcoin scene in Bangalore. Finally, sex work and Bitcoin. Bitcoin-friendly pro-dom Mistress Magpie sat down with our own Stephanie Murphy to talk money and identity in a world of power dynamics. It's another long one. Enjoy the show. Today on Let's Talk Bitcoin, we're joined by Michael Young, founder and president of the Simon Fraser Bitcoin Club of Canada. Mike, how are you?
Good, excellent.
That's good. You contacted me last month saying that you were the only Bitcoin club operating on a college in Canada. And so I kind of wanted to get you on and talk to you about what the journey has been to this point. Because again, we started talking, I think, about this before the price increased 10x that it has in the last couple of months. I'm very curious what things are like on college campuses and really what's changed in the last 6 months that you've been doing this.
From my perspective, in my experience, I think Bitcoin penetration on college campuses has actually been quite low. Surprisingly, on most of the campuses that I visited here, including my own school, most people haven't heard of Bitcoin. Anywhere from professors down to the students, most people haven't really heard about it. So that for me has been a bit of a surprise. You expect that young people, especially people who are in school, would know something about Bitcoin, being that it's so cool, so innovative, and so high tech.
So why do you think that is, and what do you think was different about it that made it so this was something that you recognized maybe a little bit earlier than your peers did?
When I first got into it in spring of 2011, even less people heard of Bitcoin back then. It was mostly people who are programmers who are in certain circles who know about it. The reason why I think in some ways it is still like that, it's because of the learning curve that comes with Bitcoin. I'm sure as you understand, to really understand how Bitcoin functions and why it's so important, you have to understand topics such as macroeconomics, how money is created, inflation, deflation. So for a really young person that's in college, that might not be something that they would understand right away. And secondly, the utility of Bitcoin hasn't been fully realized. So if you're just a kid going to school, living in a dorm, at this point, there really isn't any reason for you to learn about Bitcoin unless you're looking to go into mining or making a lot of money through investing. But I foresee that in the near future, this will change.
The club that you run, do you currently run this club or did you start this club? You said that the school that you used to attend, are you still in school now?
Yeah, I'm in school here at Simon Fraser University for business administration. Prior to coming to the school in the fall of 2011, I got to know Bitcoin quite well in the summer. I started out as a minor, and even back then, I always had the thought of starting a school club, that would bring all sorts of Bitcoin enthusiasts together and just to really research the topic and to network and to create projects on top of Bitcoin. I didn't actually take much actions towards that until beginning of 2013. And surprisingly, around that time, the only club that ever came into existence for Bitcoin was Stanford's Bitcoin group. So yeah, it was a good opportunity for me to just start a club here and to learn as I go. And yeah, it's really rewarding.
I'm not familiar with Simon Fraser University. How large of a school is that? And do you consider the club that you've started to be a success? What types of events do you do? And give me an idea of what you're actually doing.
So far, we've done 2 major events to spread word about Bitcoin, to teach people what it is on a really simple layman term. Our first event was back in September, and that was pretty good. We had a turnout about 40 to 50 people. And most of them, surprisingly, weren't even from the school. They weren't students. Most of them were business people and entrepreneurs from outside of school. And our second event was hosted at the end of November last year. And that was a really big success. We had at least 120 people in attendance. It was a packed event, and we had 3 presentations. One of them was on how Bitcoin works on a very basic level, how it relates to politics. Second one was a wallet tutorial, how to start up your own blockchain.info wallet and how to secure it. And our final presentation was on Bitcoin and crowdfunding, how it's going to change crowdfunding for the next generation. And it was really good. We had a lot of people come in that didn't have any knowledge of Bitcoin at all, didn't know how Bitcoin works, and of course never held any Bitcoin. By the time everyone left, almost everybody had some Bitcoin on them. And the biggest success that came out of this was we worked with a federally registered charity called School Building School that helps build schools in Uganda. And we were able to host the world's first in-person Bitcoin fundraiser at the end of this event. And we raised over 1,500 Canadian dollars in under 9 minutes using QR codes. So that was really cool.
That sounds really cool. So for people, you mentioned that there aren't very many of these clubs out there. One of the big things that I've been hearing people talk about is wanting to really explain the cryptocurrency movement to people who are actually in colleges, because you're right. Generally, they are quite forward-looking, and looking for next trends and technology and things like that. But because of the fact that this is money, and we don't really teach about money in a way that's useful to understanding Bitcoin, we don't really, learn about it in other areas of life because it's just less convenient to do that. People don't really have the context. So really, that's what it seems like the problem is at colleges, right? It's just that people don't have a good enough reason to actually want to care.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So that's why I mentioned that if in the near future, some kind of service that's really trendy, very useful for young people come along and really integrate Bitcoin into its core, if something like that comes about, then you can expect Bitcoin to take off really quickly. It doesn't have to be anything that crazy. For example, if tomorrow eBay started taking Bitcoin and Amazon started taking Bitcoin, then Bitcoin would be a very casual and normal thing to talk about on campus. But we haven't really got there yet.
So if somebody is interested in kind of replicating what you've done, what were kind of some of the things that jumped out at you as being harder than you thought, or you needed to go about it a different way than you would have assumed until you actually did it? Are there anything like gotchas that people can watch out for or that they should make sure to do?
There's about 3 things that I would give to any other inspiring student who wants to start a club or a Bitcoin group at a university level or college level. That's first of all to really know the in and out of your school's administration, to network and to find out what exactly you need to do in order to gain official recognition from the school as a school club. And secondly, just go out there. If you have an active Bitcoin community within your city, go out there and network with those people. Just don't be shy about it and really push yourself forward and really build those connections. And finally, really do something that provides value to your audience. So that can range from hosting events to hosting workshops, hosting seminars, to having a great Facebook page that provides a lot of fresh, relevant content for people, and to really engage your audience. Just to have a club on its own isn't really that much of a big deal, in my opinion, but it's what you provide the audience that matters in the end. That's what keeps them coming back. And I would say if there's a 4th point is to just don't have too much expectations. If you're expecting college professors on campus to understand Bitcoin and be warm to it right away, it's not going to happen, but it will happen over time. As it has in my experience.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that for a second. I was going to ask, on the one hand, again, it seems like colleges should be really forward-looking because they're, focused on what's coming and, teaching people fundamentals and stuff like that. But at the same time, with money, the question is sometimes different. What has the response been like from the faculty or from people who you've engaged with at the bureaucratic level of your school?
It ranges from one extreme to the other. So we have people who are very high up in our school who don't know much about Bitcoin at all and don't seem to really care. And then you have all these other people who just wouldn't stop talking to me about it. So, I have professors who've tried to ask me how to acquire some Bitcoin and bought some Bitcoins from me. And we have other professors who are in computer science who should be interested but are not interested. So it's really a good personality test. If you expose somebody to Bitcoin, regardless of who they are and what their profession are, once you expose Bitcoin to them, you can kind of tell what kind of person they are by how they react to it. So kind of all over the place in terms of how people react. Like I said, some people are very, very warm. They're all really, really curious. They just want to learn more and more, right? And there's other people who just don't want to learn anything about it. Just seem to think of it as a fad, as a trend that's going to fade away in some time. I would just like people to know that in Vancouver right now, we're pretty much shaping up to be the next Berlin of Bitcoin. So we have quite a few merchants here locally that accept Bitcoin as of today. If you go to the Bitcoin Co-op website, which is bitcoincoop.org, bitcoincoop.org, and you click on the merchants page, you can see that we have more than 20 different businesses locally, like brick and mortar stores that accept Bitcoin. So anything from like cafes to moving company to landscaping to restaurants, you'll find it here in Vancouver. So I think that's something really cool that a lot of people might not know unless they came to Vancouver. And actually one of the members of the co-op, I'm actually part of the co-op as well, but one of the fellow members of the co-op is actually going to get a Bitcoin tattoo. And for this, the tattoo parlor has agreed to accept Bitcoin. So that's pretty good dedication from them.
Okay, so let's actually follow up on this a second. So you're saying that Vancouver is similar to Berlin. And I think what you mean is the Kreuzberg district of Berlin, where there's like a street where there's a whole bunch of different... Okay, so this is one of those things that people have varying opinions on, whether or not in-person adoption matters, and whether or not you need kind of like a critical mass of people in order to make it make sense to do that. So it's kind of a chicken-egg problem. So I'm interested... Yeah. What do you think is happening here? You've watched this happen, go from no stores in Vancouver to 20 stores in Vancouver. What's that progress been like?
I think initially the people who sign up to take Bitcoin, I wouldn't say initially, even right now, a lot of the stores that are signing up to take Bitcoin are doing it in order to gain free publicity, which is quite effective still. Eventually, this will no longer matter. If like half the store around your block already takes Bitcoin, then it doesn't really matter for you to take it anymore. It's not going to get you any more free press. But there are a lot of people who are operating these businesses that really stand firm in the principle of cryptocurrency and that it is a currency that has no government involvement.
Do you know people who are patronizing these businesses more because they accept Bitcoin than they didn't?
Oh, yes, definitely. There's quite a few restaurants that are getting a lot more businesses than they used to because they've taken Bitcoin. And because of the fact that the club and the Bitcoin Co-op, we both co-host a lot of events at these venues for taking Bitcoin. So we co-host a lot of meetups. These meetups, they bring in massive amount of clients on a weekend when usually there's no people coming in at all. So this is like
your version of the BitMob thing that we've seen in other parts of the country. Where okay, great. Where you basically just like mob a retailer with a whole bunch of people who want to accept Bitcoin all at once. So it is worth them setting it up because, hey, they got all this business that they might. Okay, cool, great.
As you know, on top of Vancouver having the world's first ATM, we're actually going to have a few Lamassu machines by the end of this month as well. There's been quite a bit of demand in Vancouver for more RoboCoins, but unfortunately the RoboCoins are a little hard to get. We are working towards getting more Lamassu, so we should have them here in town by the end of the month. So you can definitely say that there is quite a bit of a Bitcoin fever here locally in Vancouver.
Are you involved in any of the ATM projects at all, or is this just other stuff that's happening in Vancouver?
I'm not involved intimately, but I am involved like by satellite because I also help convince different merchants down here in Vancouver to accept Bitcoin and also to not only take Bitcoin, but to also maybe set up ATMs. So yeah, I'm involved in just convincing merchants to look into Bitcoin as a retailer and to also provide some way for people to buy Bitcoins.
Well, Mike, we're out of time for today, but I think we're definitely going to have you back in a couple of months to talk about how things have changed, frankly, in Vancouver, and what this situation's been like. Because it really seems like you're in the middle of it in an area where there's a lot of activity going on.
Yeah, we're hosting the Bitcoin Co-op and the Simon Fraser Bitcoin Club. We're hosting a huge event in the middle of next month, mid-February, called CoinFest. Like Coin Festival, CoinFest. Mm-hmm. This will be a cross-country event where different cities in Canada, including Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, and so on and so forth, will be hosting, co-hosting events throughout different venues that accept Bitcoin to celebrate Bitcoin. So at the end of this event, the club will be hosting the first CoinFest keynote event, which will feature a few prominent people in the Bitcoin community. And this will be a whole day event, and we expect no less than 500 people in attendance. Yeah, I was talking to somebody from the co-op about this. They might even invite yourself to come to Vancouver and check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you want to mention this, you can mention to your audience that I was in Brazil for over 2 weeks. I actually came back on this Monday. And surprisingly, Bitcoin penetration in Brazil has been quite low. In Rio de Janeiro, it's been quite low. But I've somehow managed to be in touch with quite a few important people. It wouldn't be that much of a stretch to see Bitcoin being taken for buying, selling goods and services, and also to be taken for donations in the favelas very soon. Yeah, it'll be an interesting time.
Yeah, sounds like it'll definitely be an interesting time. So, just to wrap this up, I'm asking people more and more, what is your broad opinion of altcoins, and are there any in particular that you actually want to talk about?
I think altcoin has a legitimate space. It is quite an interesting idea, and for some of the altcoins really don't have any value, like Doggy Coin, for example. It is a very funny concept, but it's more of a meme, if anything. But certain other altcoins, like Litecoin, for example, the number 2 cryptocurrency right now, I think Litecoin has very beneficial value in that the confirmations are faster. So as some of the other coins like Namecoin, for example, which I believe it to be a DNS cryptocurrency, that has value as well. But most of the alternative currency that exists out there don't really have a need to exist, other than the fact that the creators of these alternative currency are out there to gain a profit. So I don't mind it. I think the market will just eventually sift out all the non-relevant players. Whatever the case is, alternative currency, whatever buzz that they create, can only benefit Bitcoin in the end, because it creates a lot of attention in the press.
If somebody wants to get in touch with you or wants to stay up to date with what's going on with your club, is there a website or somewhere they can visit you?
Yeah, they can just go to www.sfu.ca/Bitcoin, and they can just email us directly at bitcoin@sfu.ca.
Mike Young, president and founder of the Simon Fraser Bitcoin Club. Thank you very much for your time.
Shop smart with your Bitcoin and get 3% back with Gift. On Gift, you can get gift cards with Bitcoin. Choose from over 200 retailers, including Target, GameStop, Gap, and more. Gift makes it easy to shop on Android or on the web. There are no additional fees, and when you shop with Bitcoin, you get 3% back. Go ahead, try Gift. That's GYFT.com.
The BitGive Foundation is a nonprofit charitable giving organization leveraging the power of the Bitcoin community to improve public health and the environment worldwide. Help us demonstrate the significant impact of Bitcoin in addressing these critical issues on a global scale. Support international giving in Bitcoin. Please visit our website at www.bitgivefoundation.org. That's www.bitgivefoundation.org.
This is Andreas Antonopoulos with Let's Talk Bitcoin. I'm sitting here with Amit Nirganarthi, who's calling me live from Bangalore, India. And we're going to talk a bit about the latest developments with Bitcoin in India and the latest news with the regulators shutting down some of the exchanges. Amit, thank you for joining the show.
Happy to be here, Andreas.
So you've been in Bitcoin for quite a while, and I hear you know many of the participants in the Bitcoin community, especially in Bangalore. And I know from looking at local Bitcoins, that's probably the most active community in India at the moment. How'd you come across Bitcoin, and how'd you get to know the local community?
I actually moved to Bangalore with another job, and I was looking for friends on the weekend, and I came across a Bitcoin meetup group, and it was like match made in heaven. Ever since I met these guys, it was a cool group of people involved in Bitcoin, you know, helping each other and teaching me about Bitcoin, and that's how I got involved.
And when was this? How long ago?
This was in May of 2013.
Oh, very good. And you've been involved with the local community. Now, India certainly hasn't made big splashes in the headlines until recently, but it seems like a natural place to adopt Bitcoin, the technology infrastructure, the level of education, the English language fluency among many in the population, all of those would indicate that it would be a place where Bitcoin would be a natural fit, especially with all of the outsourcing and offshoring. I have in the past paid contractors in India with Bitcoin. It took a while to explain, but certainly worked for me. So what do you think makes Bitcoin special for India, or India special for Bitcoin?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons that Bitcoin and India are like a match made in heaven. There is a high tech heavy force here. Bangalore is known as the Silicon Valley of Asia. A lot of coding happens here, and there's a lot of tech savvy, educated individuals who would very easily understand the Bitcoin concept. On top of that, Indians have a penchant for gold, and some people don't like to draw these comparisons, but ever since the English left in the 40s, the currency is not someplace that a lot of people would like to put a lot of their assets, so they go out of their way to buy gold, and they're used to using gold as a store of value. I don't see that much of a leap for people to have Bitcoin in their portfolio as well.
So if it's such a natural fit, how come China beat you to the headlines? I always thought that India would be the next explosive center of adoption. It seems like it hasn't quite caught on yet. Do you think you have an explanation for that? Do you have any insights?
I mean, I have an opinion just because I grew up in Hong Kong and I've spent a lot of time in India. I am an American, but I would say that Indians just generally are less risk takers and like to really either have full, clear guidance when they're doing things, or it has to be like a set. People have been doing it for centuries. So I think I can see why the Chinese have overtaken us in terms of volume. In India, I just don't think it has caught on yet. And especially recently, I mean, the press here has just been horrible towards Bitcoin. We had a couple good days after the big conference in Bangalore. Then 2 of our exchanges voluntarily shut down. One of them got raided last week. And now all the press that's coming out is, they're referring to people who deal with Bitcoin as being a gang. They are talking a lot about how it can be used for money laundering issues. And here in India, Hawala networks are huge. And nobody can say that, people are not laundering money through Hawala network, but Bitcoin is being targeted as, what are we going to do now?
So Hawala, for our audience who may not be familiar, is a person-to-person informal network of payment. Bitcoin is being associated with Hawala, and not in a positive way. Have you seen any positive coverage from any Indian media, even not necessarily mainstream?
TechCrunch India did a positive article. Times of India and The Hindu did one on December 16th, before the raids, talking about, in a positive way, how the exchange was opening up in India, and Buttercoin is here trying to speak to the RBI, trying to get an actual regulated exchange hub. So there has been some positive news, but maybe it's because we're so involved in it and we just keep seeing all the articles. But I feel like the last week and a half has been a little bit depressing here. Every time I open up Reddit or Bitcoin Talk, any of the forums, it's like the end of the world for Bitcoin in India. And it's almost at a very crucial point. All of us who are involved in Bitcoin or Bitcoin businesses or trying to launch startups, we need to come out really strong and start talking about the positive things about Bitcoin, which we are doing. We formed or are in the process of forming an alliance. And there's talk about filing some sort of public interest litigation, which is called PIL here. So just to take our case to get a ruling on Bitcoin, because as we all know, India moves very slowly when it comes to decisions like this. And I'm not so sure we can wait. I'm not so sure it's good for the country if we wait, because if they push Bitcoin underground, the problem's only going to get worse, because this is a country where a good majority of its economy is run in the black, and it's just a known thing. Real estate is bought and purchased in cash. They have fronts, they don't pay their taxes, and it's just a known open secret here that I almost think that Bitcoin can solve a lot of problems for India, because as we've all seen with the Silk Road seizure, they got the coins and they traced where those coins are from. And here with the exchanges that shut down, people were giving their PAN card information. And for those of your viewers, listeners who are not familiar, a PAN card is sort of like our social security card here, where you need it to do any financial transaction. So people were giving their PAN card information. The exchanges were only operating from a bank-to-bank transfer. So that is a very strong control. If any regulatory authority wanted to see who's buying this Bitcoin or how much of this Bitcoin is being bought, they really have all the records there. It's a lot better than going to a street in New Delhi and speaking to your local Hawala dealer and handing him cash.
So last week was a challenge for Bitcoin in India. Can you tell us a bit about what happened? There was some regulatory rulings and then also some raids. What did it look like from your perspective on the ground?
The day no one expected, none of us expected the Reserve Bank of India to come out with a statement so quickly after the conference. In fact, one of the Reserve Bank of India officials was there but refused to be identified and refused to, talk to the press that he was even attending the conference. Afterwards, when they put out their statement, all the papers picked it up and they didn't say it was illegal. And none of us, assumed it was illegal. But everyone got very scared because if it's not explicitly legal, then in India, the assumption is it's illegal and you need to have a license to operate. But nobody knows what licenses we need to get. Some exchanges have tried going through the exchange, like getting a foreign exchange license, and nothing seems to be working.
Yeah, that's certainly completely the opposite of the U.S. startup culture, where if it's not explicitly illegal, it's assumed to be legal, and we'll deal with the circumstances later. And I'm assuming the uncertainty is the hard part because there's no clear path, and that opens the door for a lot of problems with corruption and bureaucracy and running around in circles trying to satisfy a whole load of different regulators who may have conflicting ideas of what's necessary.
And to be fair, India has very strong capital controls to protect its economy in whatever way that the Reserve Bank of India thinks is appropriate. And we understand, I used to be a banker for 7 years in New York, and I'm very familiar with anti-money laundering laws, and I understand where they're coming and what angle they're coming from. But I think that Bitcoin can actually help India more than it can hurt it. If once you start getting to the future of Bitcoin and we can start maybe even, it's a dream come true, but if we could track these government infrastructure projects in Bitcoin, it would be amazing. If we could track, there's a lot of schemes for the poor people in India. 700 million people here are living below the poverty line, and whatever ruling party is in power, they get their votes by promising a kg of rice for a family, or sending your kids to school for free, or promising you 100 days for work. And when you have these huge billion-dollar programs for the poor, a lot of corruption seeps in. If these programs were administered through like a master coin or a colored coin or some sort of, honest, open general ledger system, corruption could actually go down drastically. I just want it to happen.
Do you think there's an element perhaps of that, understanding that money laundering is not really a threat that comes from the bottom up, but really in most places the money laundering is done by the banks for the banks and to strengthen corruption? Is that part of the reason perhaps behind these rulings, reflexive protection of established interests?
I think that that's what, a lot of us say, but to be honest, I don't think that they understand. I don't think the politicians really know just yet. I think this
is just a knee-jerk reaction, perhaps.
Yes, I don't think they're thinking so deep to how this is going to affect themselves sending money to Dubai yet. I just think this was a knee-jerk reaction. Who knows? They may see a benefit in Bitcoin for themselves, and then all of a sudden it gets fast-tracked. I personally believe this was a knee-jerk reaction. I'm staying positive. We keep moving forward with our Bitcoin businesses.
I think it's better to talk about the positive aspects. Certainly, there are three major areas where Bitcoin seems to be well positioned for India to take maximum advantage, at least from my external perspective. And if you could let me know if these make sense and give me your experience. First one's remittances from abroad. Obviously, people working in other countries who send money home. then the entire offshoring, outsourcing, BPO business, which I certainly participated in, hiring service providers from India. And then finally, the tremendous opportunity for startups in India to build services with the tremendous software engineering skills and also the human resources to deliver high quality services to the Bitcoin network from anywhere in the world. Do you see those three and perhaps some others as strong possibilities for India?
The remittance market is something we talk about all the time. Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Bahrain, these Gulf Coast countries, the GCC countries, employ more Indians than actual citizens in those countries. And those Indians get paid a very good wage and they send their money back home to the villages in India. Now, that remittance market could really help Indians save more of their money if it was done through Bitcoin. So that is a huge market that, the government should be happy to support. Of course, there's the BPO outsourcing, but I would almost say not on the Infosys, Wipro, GE call center level. There's a lot of freelancers in India, tons of them who are on Odesk or developpreneur.com.
Yes, exactly. My personal use has been more focused on the Odesk and Elance freelancers, for whom a few small payments a week can be very severely affected by PayPal and Western Union fees.
You got it. There's small-time designers. There's a small-time content writers here. And, they need to be accepting Bitcoin. That would be amazing, but I'm just so scared that because of all this recent bad press, a lot of these freelancers are going to shy away from it.
And what about the startup scene in Bangalore and other tech centers in India? Are you beginning to see young entrepreneurs, dipping a toe into the Bitcoin ecosystem and trying to find ways to build services, not just perhaps exchanges, but more broadly other supporting services for Bitcoin?
Oh, yeah. I mean, at this conference, I ran into a lot of startups. A lot of people wanted to start BPO offices just to help other Bitcoin companies, because a lot of these startups in America and the West, in Europe and Russia, they're going to need to, manage customer support and service. Mt. Gox has customer support. So India is already really good at things like that. So there's a lot of people looking to become sort of like the Bitcoin BPO center, which is really, really good. There is exchanges is obviously a big thing because that's where the money is and that's where people can get the volume. But, I'm seeing other currencies being launched. There's a currency called Lakshmi Coin, which is aiming to be a domestic Indian digital coin. There is a lot of development work that's being done for foreign companies. So here in Bangalore, there is a gentleman named Benson Samuel, and he advises lots of foreign companies on doing development work and getting Bitcoin work coded. So there is a lot of interest, and just in general, the startup scene in Bangalore is really starting to take off, whether it's Bitcoin or not. We're starting to see shared working spaces. More people are not taking, high paying jobs and going to call centers now. They're taking a chance and trying to join a startup. So that culture is slowly taking off here.
And certainly Bitcoin opens those startups immediately to a global audience and a global customer base, because usually in these types of endeavors, payments is one of the hardest things to do, especially in a country with currency controls.
You got it. And what scares me is, we missed the boat with the internet. That's something someone was telling me. I'm not 100% sure, so somebody fact check me. But in the 90s, when countries had to claim their IP addresses, India was late to the boat and it supposedly screwed them. I'm not sure what the full story is. Or I don't want this country to miss the boat when it comes to Bitcoin, because we all know it's not going anywhere, and it will become legitimized. And 5 years, 6 years from now, we're going to look back and say, oh, remember when we had to fight so hard? No one had to fight for email or Skype this hard. I don't see why we have to fight so hard for Bitcoin.
Oh, we did have to fight for email and Skype so hard. Trust me, the telecom companies were very much against it. I remember a time when trying to do a long distance modem call, you'd run into filters on international circuits that were cutting out the modem call on purpose because they didn't want you to bypass their own telecommunications infrastructure. The fight was there. It just wasn't as visible. Perhaps it was visible to the internet community, and we learned a lot from that, but nothing was rosy on the internet either.
Nothing was rosy. Okay, I can agree with that. Well, one more point I want to bring up is because Indians love gold so much, we don't make enough gold in this country. So what do we have to do? We have to sell our rupees and buy dollars and import the gold, and the government tax gold 10% because now we're selling rupees and it's hurting the currency. With Bitcoin, there's a huge opportunity to mine Bitcoins domestically in this country and to sell Bitcoins to people in rupees. And now there's no risk of people sending the Bitcoins out, and they're buying Bitcoins that are locally produced in rupees, which actually will strengthen the rupee. And who knows, if things get in place, big time miners, I see a lot of mining operations here in India. Big time miners can now export their Bitcoin. And what does India want to do? They want to export goods. They should really jump on this opportunity because power is cheap. In some places, you can get 3 to 8 cents per kilowatt. Labor is cheap, and the technology is there the technology knowledge is there. And I think mining Bitcoins internally and exporting is good business for India.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The other one you mentioned also, the customer service industry. One of the things that we really need more of, and we're suffering at the moment, is customer service, because all of the Bitcoin startups are facing exponential growth and are trying to bootstrap with personnel going from 10 people to 100 people to 1,000 people in a period of a year or two. And, it's really showing, because the customer service aspect suffers as a result of an inability to absorb all of the new adoption and demand. Certainly being able to outsource some of that and being able to very rapidly man up and get lots of personnel in India would be a boon to the Bitcoin community. So, Amit, we've had this little setback in terms of the regulators, but certainly this is more of a long game. Where do you see the future of Bitcoin in India? Are you hopeful? Do you see the community flourishing?
I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. I see the community flourishing. I think it can help. This remittance market is the first thing that it can really do to have an economic impact on people who are not making that much money. And it can really help them save money. And, that 12% fee is enough for a family to eat for a month. You don't need that much money in this country. So everything that Western Union takes hurts them. And if there's a way to do it for 1% or less than 1%, let's say 50 basis points, that's a huge opportunity. That's a win-win for everybody.
Very good. So looking forward to hearing more from you on how things are developing in India, and hope to have you back on the show. And thank you so much.
If there's one thing I could add, I would just say, just to the Bitcoin community in general, keep an eye on what's happening to the owner of Buy Sell Bitcoin. His name is Mahan Gupta. There's rumors that he's under house arrest. He hasn't been able to use his phone. They've confiscated his Bitcoins. He's going to need a lot of support, encouragement, and help. And maybe if people could get on the forums, the Bitcoin India forum is very active on this topic, putting together a legal defense fund to help him if it's something that he needs. And this is something that we just want to make sure that he gets out okay, because he has a family and he is, a pioneer in this country.
Absolutely. The Bitcoin community is global, and we absolutely need to stand up for each other. One day it could be me or you who are being harassed by law enforcement for no reason whatsoever other than running a legitimate exchange or some other business in Bitcoin. And we need to stand up for each other. That's a great point. Thank you so much, Amit Nirgunathi, for joining us here, and hope to speak to you again soon.
EasyDNS is the Swiss Army knife for your domain names, helping meet their customers' individual needs since 1998. EasyDNS has been an outspoken critic of SOPA and CISPA. EasyDNS was an early supporter of Bitcoin, and now they are proud to sponsor this show. Do business with a company that shares your values. Get a 13% discount when you pay with Bitcoin. Go to bitcoin.easydns.com and be sure to use discount code LTB. Hi, Stephanie here. Would you like to turn your book into an enthralling audiobook? Need a persuasive commercial to promote your company? How about a narrator for your explainer video? Here's where I can help. I'm a freelance voiceover artist, and since 2009, I've lent my voice to dozens of audio projects. To hear some examples of my work, check out my website, smvoice.info. If you like what you hear, I'd love to be the voice of your next project. Get in touch at smvoice.info. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've got a special guest with me. I am talking today with Mistress Magpie. Hello, Mistress.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, thank you so much for being on Let's Talk Bitcoin today. You got in touch with us through the Let's Talk Bitcoin website because I guess you were listening to the show and you heard a discussion of Bitcoin and pro-doms, which is what you are. Is that right?
Actually, I haven't heard that particular discussion on your show.
Oh.
I actually found your show through the Bitcoin Talk forum because I've become extremely interested in Bitcoin, and I thought that I would drop you a line. So I'll definitely be catching up on that show in the next few days.
Oh, great. Well, that's a nice coincidence. So you are interested in Bitcoin, and what do you call yourself? A dominatrix, a pro-dom?
Either is fine. Pro-dom, professional, mistress, dominatrix, sex worker, any of those terms are just fine by me.
Okay. And you are based out of the UK, but you don't sound like you have a British accent.
Indeed, I'm based in Plymouth, in Devon, in the UK. I'm an American by origin. I've been here about 8 years now.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So I guess the first question I have for you is, how did you get interested in Bitcoin? Like, how did you first find out about it?
I actually found out about Bitcoin just when it was coming up, being a very nerdy kind of a person and interested in cryptology and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I did not get into Bitcoin at the inception of the currency, and I remembered Bitcoin when the big article came out about the gentleman who found lots of forgotten Bitcoins on his computer and bought a flat with some of them. So I hadn't been working in sex work when I first heard of Bitcoin, but when I was reminded of its existence, I thought, hey, this would be a great currency for sex workers to use because it's an anonymous currency and it has many of the advantages of cash, except for it can be sent remotely. So I thought it would be great for myself and for my clients.
Great. So what was the time frame? Like when was that you were first looking into Bitcoin?
It was probably 4 or 5 years ago, whenever it was starting up.
Really? Oh, that's really early.
Yeah, it was. And I was like, okay, this is kind of a cool idea. I had been curious about e-gold before that, and that never really went anywhere. And I just sort of threw this into the dustbin of my head saying, oh, wow, this is another little venture online that's never going to go anywhere. And boy, was I wrong.
Wow. Well, I'm impressed that you were really early on, at least with the idea of Bitcoin, and you saw some potential usefulness in it right away.
Yeah. Initially, of course, a few years ago, I wasn't involved in sex work, and my interest in Bitcoin was really, political and economic. The idea of a stateless currency is so important for freedom and civil liberties. So just as a bit of an activist my whole life, that's my initial interest. This time, coming back this year, my interest is still that, but also this more direct interest professionally as a sex worker.
Yeah, so you would consider yourself a person who's interested in freedom and liberty, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in freedom and liberty, but I'm coming at it from a left-wing perspective. So activists, people who are organizing for social change, one of the ways that they can be monitored and tracked is with their financial transactions. So if they're doing that sort of thing with Bitcoin, and more importantly, if the entire world is using Bitcoin, then that confers a profound freedom on everybody, because the economy is how you live your whole life, right? So if you're doing anything from buying fetish gear to organizing a website for a dissident in China, Bitcoin is going to help you out there by protecting your anonymity.
Yeah, right on. So, okay, how did you get interested in, I guess, like the BDSM community, or how did you get into your current line of work?
Well, that's actually two distinct questions. I've been involved in the BDSM community since I was about 19 years old. I'm 34 now, and it's always been a hobby and interest of mine. In terms of my work, in terms of doing BDSM professionally, I started thinking about that last year in 2012 because I'd been doing phone sex and stuff like that. And basically, I was in the southwest of the United Kingdom, where I still am. The economy's depressed, and I was having trouble finding steady work. So I picked this work up. And then I realized, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this. Why don't I stop doing it on the phone and just start doing it in person? When I moved to Plymouth, my partner David had a lot of excellent BDSM kit, and I thought, why don't we put this kit to work? And so we started using the front room of our shared flat as my studio or my dungeon.
Wow. So had you ever been self-employed before that?
Well, a little bit of self-employment with web design, tech support, and of course the phone sex stuff as well. That was all independent contract work, although it was served through a website. But in terms of really putting in the fanatical amount of time that you have to put into developing a business and getting that sort of excitement and momentum, yeah, Mistress Magpie has been my first real full-fledged business.
There was a joke in there somewhere about nobody's cracking the whip but you, so.
Exactly. Nobody's cracking the whip but me. I'm my own boss, and I like being the boss, and other various little cracks like that. But definitely, I am a bit of a control freak, and running my own business is a good thing for me.
Yeah. So do you accept Bitcoins in your business?
Yes, I do. I accept Bitcoins in my business either at the point of sale. So if somebody's coming in, I can show them my QR code, or I can show them a paper printout Bitcoin code that they can scan and pay me then, or they can pay me in advance. It's also a good screening tool for deposits. Sometimes if I get somebody on the phone and they want to have a booking, have a session, I will ask them to give a very small deposit. And before I started doing this with Bitcoin, they would have to use Amazon gift certificates or PayPal, or to go to the newsagent and do a top-up to a mobile phone. And that all takes a lot of time and effort. And with PayPal, of course, your personal details and even your address can be disclosed. So for a lot of my clients, that wasn't a workable solution for them. But if they can send me that deposit with Bitcoin, that's great, because I get my deposit, which secures their booking, and then I know they're going to show up. But they also don't have to give me their real name or anything like that. And that's really important for their discretion because, of course, it's sex work, and discretion is very important.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It sounds like it's a win-win for both parties. So, like, what do you do in a typical session? I know there's no typical, but like, how long would a session with a client be, and like, what are some things that might go on?
BDSM session can involve a huge amount of activities. It can be sort of the stereotypical thing where I'll strip somebody's clothes off and give them a spanking over my knee, but it also can involve role play. I've got a lot of people who come in who want to have a role play of a stern headmistress, or a nurse, or a school nurse, or something like that, or even a domineering aunt. They'll have a scenario that they want to recreate and explore, and maybe something that has been traumatic in their past is going to turn into something really cathartic and uplifting for the client. There's also the whole definition of a session is not necessarily what I'm doing. A lot of my clients want to have sort of an ongoing relationship with the mistress. So, for instance, a client might be into chastity, where a male client will have a chastity device secured on their genitals, and I would control when that device was unlocked or locked up. And that person, I might only see them once a month or twice a month, but there will be an ongoing interaction with me and that client. It can really involve lots of different things, and that's why I insist on talking to my clients via voice, because it just gets really complicated really fast otherwise, and you need to sort of connect with each other and hash out what it is that we're going to do together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for telling us about that. Wondering, what are the laws where you are, and like, have you ever had any legal issues or legal problems with the kind of business that you're in?
The laws are actually really good for mistresses in the United Kingdom. There's a distinction between an escort and a mistress. For an escort, a client might have sex with them, and that doesn't happen with me. A client doesn't have any kind of sex with me. It's more of a BDSM or a kink experience than it is a strictly sexual experience, although it can be quite sensual. So the clients associating with me, everything is totally legal, totally above board, and I comply with all the UK laws.
Okay, so for one of the reasons I could envision that perhaps somebody might be interested in using Bitcoin if they're in the sex work industry is because it could help you potentially get around certain laws that, somebody might be doing things in their jurisdiction that aren't allowed by the politicians. Do you think that might be the case for other people?
In terms of circumventing the laws with Bitcoin, that's not something I've ever particularly explored. I know in the United States, BDS is a varying level of legal depending on what jurisdiction you're in. And of course, Bitcoin might be used for those sorts of transactions. But I really am trying to encourage people to see Bitcoin as a legitimate and legal currency. The reason it's good for me and my clients isn't because anything we're doing is illegal, but it protects our anonymity and it protects my security as a business user. If somebody wanted to pay me all of their session fee in advance in PayPal, I might wrinkle my nose at that a little bit because you can get a charge back and the money can be stuck back in their account. I've got fees and everything else. But with Bitcoin, of course, that's not going to happen. So I get that added level of security. But in terms of circumventing the law with Bitcoin, that's not something I really know anything about.
Yeah, I got you right on. So when did you start accepting Bitcoin at your business? And I guess, is it popular? Like, what percentage of your clients might pay you in Bitcoin?
I've only started accepting Bitcoin in my business in the last few weeks. I've actually found that there are very few clients that I have existing that are interested in Bitcoin, although it is something I will chat about as, a session's over and they're getting ready to go on with their day. In terms of new clients, when I ask for a deposit, I always mention Bitcoin as an option. Most of the Bitcoin transactions I've been getting have actually been tips. There's a wonderful tip culture with Bitcoin, and I've been going on Reddit. There's a little subreddit called Girls Gone Bitcoin, and I've been sticking pictures up there, and I've gotten quite a few tips from that. So it's really kind of cool because I've got two parallel income streams going on. I've got my pound sterling income stream, which is the sort of face-to-face stuff. And then I'm producing, smutty pictures and sticking them on the internet. And I'm getting Bitcoin for that. And that's great because I'm not taking time away from work I would be getting sterling for to earn some Bitcoin. I've got the two streams going on in parallel there. So that's good for me.
Yeah, it's almost like a passive income element to it, right? Because once you take those pictures, they're there forever.
It is a passive income element. Unfortunately, I've not been able to capitalize yet very well on that. The subreddit where I post is basically the only place I can find where there's people generating content, adult content for Bitcoin, and there's just not a lot of transaction going on. I've also looked on Bitcoin Talk forum, and I've seen there's a couple of cam sites, but they seem to be empty all the time. So right now, I'm really interested in researching a sort of porn platform where people are producing videos, producing photos and stuff like that, and people are paying them for that stuff in Bitcoin. I think that economy is a very new one, and I would like to get in on the ground floor of that. I would really like there to be a community where there are people producing this stuff, bespoke stuff for clients. They can make requests. And all of this commerce is going on in Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it might even, I could envision a scenario in which a sex worker transitions from working in the physical world with clients to working online with clients. And when you're working online, you could potentially have a situation where they have to prepay up front, and if any funny business goes on, then you can just shut off the stream, and you don't have to worry about them physically violating any boundaries or whatever because they're not in the same room with you.
That's an interesting way of putting it. In terms of my work, I equally like the remote work that I do and the in-person work. When I'm doing my job in person, when somebody's coming to my studio and having a session with me, I've always got security available in another room and I'm safe. So I've never really worried about somebody violating my boundaries. It's really a very safe job. So I wouldn't see myself transitioning from in-person work to remote work as if one was somehow better than the other. However, that is definitely not the case for all sex workers. There's a lot of independent escorts and other types of sex worker who have that problem. And also the fact that they're carrying a lot of cash can be a danger to them because it sets them up for being a target of thieves. So that's another really great reason to support Bitcoin, because if the customers and the providers are using Bitcoin, that gives them that additional layer of security, especially if they're using paper wallets.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. I appreciate that. I didn't mean to imply that all sex work is dangerous or anything like that, but it definitely opens up a lot of possibilities when you're using Bitcoin and working for yourself in that field.
It does. Another sort of benefit to it, and putting my activist hat on, is it really encourages independent sex workers as opposed to women who may have been trafficked or controlled by pimps, because if they are taking funds and putting them directly into their Bitcoin wallet, they have a little bit more control over where that money's going, whereas a pimp could just take half of the money or even all of the money if it was being given to the provider in cash. Of course, there are still problems with providers receiving Bitcoin because a lot of times pimps or people who are controlling trafficked women have their claws in really deep, and those women are going to give them the cut even if it's in Bitcoin, but it still gives them a little bit more control in that situation.
So when you're working with clients and you know that somebody may want to pay in Bitcoin, do you give them any extra incentive? Like, do you offer a discount for Bitcoin, or do you mark up your US dollar prices to compensate for, like, basically how easy it is to use Bitcoin compared to those other methods?
I actually offer a £20 discount for anybody who wants to pay me in Bitcoin for an hour. So, my fee is £120 an hour at present. So if somebody wants to pay me in Bitcoin, then they can pay me £100 worth of Bitcoin at whatever the exchange rate is for that day. And that gives them an incentive because Bitcoin's really valuable and a lot of people don't want to get rid of their Bitcoin. And it also is perfectly fine by me because I really believe in Bitcoin as a currency. I'm bullish about it, believe it's going to continue to go up. So I'm very happy to receive £100 value of Bitcoin instead of £120 of sterling, of fiat money, as it's so called.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And what about the dollars, or I guess not dollars, but the fiat
pounds,
money, the pounds
yeah.
that you receive for your work? Are you like buying Bitcoin with them? Are you converting it, or are you only basically buying Bitcoin with your time and energy?
At this point in time, I'm not actually converting any pound sterling into Bitcoin. I'm enjoying the psychological experiment of creating value out of nothing. Well, it's not nothing. It's my time, effort, and creativity, but without putting any fiat money in, actually making value directly out of my labor, the sweat of my brow, and creating Bitcoin with it. And I've got a large growing Bitcoin wallet. I've paid for some stuff Christmas with it. Oh yes, I had my first face-to-face non-work Bitcoin transaction yesterday.
Oh.
Basically, one of my submissives, Bunny, was over at the house, and I got a friend named Dante phoning me up, and he had some gig tickets that I wanted, but I didn't have any cash. I didn't feel like going to the bank. Bunny had some fiat currency, and I had some Bitcoin. He had a Bitcoin wallet, so I gave him 25 pounds worth of Bitcoin. He gave me 25 pounds of sterling. And then I took that money and I paid that to Dante for my gig tickets. So there you go. It's kind of cool.
It's great. Yeah, it's bringing it really full circle.
Mm-hmm. And I was very excited about it as well. I ran and told David, my partner, I've just done a non-work Bitcoin transaction. I was very excited.
Cool. So I've heard it proposed, and I don't know of anybody who's actually doing this at any point. I don't know of anybody who's doing this yet, but I've heard the idea floated around that potentially people who offer services, like whatever the service be, maybe massage or BDSM kind of scene services or anything that they could really think, house cleaning, whatever.
Sure, any kind of service, yeah.
Yeah, could list the service on local Bitcoins, and then people could pay them in Bitcoins for the service, and it would also be a way to advertise. And in that way, that local Bitcoins could almost turn into a platform that's similar to something like Craigslist. I don't know if Craigslist is big in the UK, but it is here, and that's how a lot of people hook up for certain services. So is that something you'd be interested in? Have you ever used local Bitcoins before?
I've just actually been looking into local Bitcoin today because a member of Bitcoin Talk forum is writing a sex worker's guide to local Bitcoin. So I've just had a look at it, and it looks kind of cool. It's definitely something I would use as an advertising platform. I'm going to have to study it a little bit more first. Websites like Craigslist and Gumtree, which is sort of a similar thing to Craigslist, are used here in the UK. And what really, really needs to happen is that those sites need to start supporting Bitcoin, like having Bitcoin QR codes on them for people or something like that, making it easy to plug in from the mainstream good and service sites into Bitcoin instead of corralling our trading into a little Bitcoin ghetto.
Right. Now, speaking of the Bitcoin forums, I'm really curious about something, and that is basically what your experience has been like as a woman who is clearly, women are at this point the minority in the Bitcoin community, and the Bitcoin Talk forum has been described by some people as a place that may not be always super friendly to women. So, what has your experience been like being in the Bitcoin community, especially from such an early time where you were on the forums 5 years ago?
I wasn't on the forums 5 years ago. I was just reading about Bitcoin passively through internet searches and things like that. I think the first place I heard about Bitcoin was Slashdot or somewhere like that. I've only been on the Bitcoin forum, Bitcoin Talk, for a few weeks. However, I've been welcomed there quite a lot. I've posted a couple of threads discussing my interest in using Bitcoin for work, and I've gotten a lot of support. I've also talked about this sort of economic gap, this hole in the economy where there's no self-created adult content site for Bitcoin that's really got a big user base, and people there have been really good sort of answering that question. People have been really good on Reddit as well, talking to me about this stuff. There's really been very few instances of sexism or anything like that. People have made a few, like one or two people, not a lot of people, have made a few offhand comments about my appearance or something like that. No one's ever had a complaint about my appearance. People like the way I look, people like my accent and so on. But there's always going to be a few haters on the internet. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog, as they say. And when that mask is over their face, they might be a little bit rude, but I've got kind of a thick skin there. I think for women in general, it's really important for women in any kind of minority group on a forum or wherever in the real world to organize, to sort of link up and network with each other, and to give each other advice and support. So that's definitely something I'm interested in doing on Bitcoin Talk and elsewhere. I think a Bitcoin women's forum might be kind of a cool idea in future, and that's something I would definitely be interested in helping to develop.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That sounds like, overall it's been a really positive experience, and I'm glad to hear that. There's a lot of overlap between people who have maybe freedom-minded political views and a little bit of nerdiness to them, and people who read about things online like Bitcoin. And, the demographics of all of those tend to skew male sometimes. But there are women out there who are interested in Bitcoin. And like you said, it's great for us to meet each other and be able to share our experiences and kind of get to know each other without becoming like an exclusive club or anything like that. But I want everybody to be able to use Bitcoin. So the more the merrier. Come on in, all types of people, everybody under the sun.
Yeah, thank you very much. Your wonderful response and welcome has been something I've experienced across the board. Everyone's been a little bit curious and had a few questions, but everybody's been really positive and welcoming, and it's just wonderful to be in this sort of early days of a new Bitcoin economy.
Yeah, absolutely. So one last question I have for you, and this is kind of a fun one.
Cool.
There's been a lot of people who have, maybe invested in Bitcoin or have worked for Bitcoin or whatever and acquired a bunch of Bitcoins. And now at this point, with the rising exchange rate of Bitcoin and fiat, they've become basically millionaires in terms of their fiat currency. And if you were to become a Bitcoin millionaire, maybe you already are, I don't know, but if you were to become a Bitcoin millionaire, would you still continue to do the work that you do?
Yes, I would definitely continue my work. I'm deeply, deeply involved in the BDSM community. I'm a lifestyle BDSM person, and I'm involved in various groups and organizations that help people to learn about BDSM and welcome new people. It's my passion as well as my profession. So even if, God willing, I become a Bitcoin millionaire-ess one day, I will still be around and people will still be able to come and see me.
Awesome. I love it. Anything else you want to add, Mistress Magpie?
I would like to add that I'm also a writer and a political activist, and I put lots of really sexy pictures online, especially on Reddit. And if you go to my website, mistressmagpie.com, you can learn a little bit more about me and how to get in touch with me. And you can also give me tips in Bitcoin. Christmas is coming and Mistress needs new stockings.
Indeed. Okay, so mistressmagpie.com. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie.
Thanks for listening to episode 78 of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Simon Fraser Bitcoin Club was produced by Adam B. Levine, edited by Matthew Zipkin, and featured Michael Young and Adam B. Levine. Bangalore Bitcoin was produced by Andreas M. Antonopoulos and edited by Denise Levine. It featured Ameth Nurganarthy and Andreas M. Antonopoulos. Bitcoin Dom was produced by Stephanie Murphy and edited by Denise Levine. It featured Mistress Magpie and Stephanie Murphy. Music was provided by Jared Rubens, Calvin Henderson, and Matthew Murkowski. Questions or comments? Email Adam at letstalkbitcoin.com. Have a good one.